So today I'm on my way to the shores of a local lake where there's some Indian mounds, and these Indian mounds are underwater most of the year. But we've had a real dry season and the lake is low, so the mounds are exposed. So we're gonna go check them out. So stay with us. So I've reached the mound location. I'm actually standing on what we will call Mound 3. There's actually several in this complex, but this is the third one from the water's edge, and I'll show you the other two in a little bit, and then I'll show you some behind me. Okay, so I was just standing here on Mound 3. This will be Mound 2, and on beyond that is Mound 1 at the water's edge, and in a little bit I'll launch the drone. I'll stand on Mound 1 and I'll show you this whole complex of mounds that goes out into this brush. These would be considered dwelling mounds. I don't know if the camera illustrates the rise in the mound, but they're about 3 feet above the rest of the ground around here. And what these were built for is right over here there's a creek, and the creek channel is dry now because we've had a very dry year, as I was saying earlier. But they built these dwelling mounds to put their huts or their dwelling shelters on to keep themselves out of the floodplain of this creek. So these are dwelling mounds. They're not burial mounds. They're not ceremonial mounds, which are other mounds that had purposes in the Native American life. But these are just dwelling mounds, and it's likely that you could find some artifacts around these mounds because they would probably sit at the edge of their mound and do their cooking and their flint knapping and the making of various tools that they use. The hut would be right in the center of the mound, so most of the work would have been done outside, unless it was colder, and then they could have been doing some work on the inside, so you may possibly find something at the center of the mound. I have found some shells out here, some rather large mussel shells, which were commonly used for food. Mussels were used for food, and then also they used the shells as tools for scraping hide and for making jewelry, and they had different uses for these shells, and some of them they could use to be a dish to mix medicines in, or there were several different uses for these shells. And I'll show you one of these shells in a little bit here. So here's one of the shells. what remains of it. And this is a medium-sized shell, but you can see that it's large enough that there'd be a good bit of meat inside this shell, and it could be used as a tray to hold certain mixtures of medicine. They could grind up some berries and different things inside this and use it as medicine. And sometimes they were worn around their neck as decorative pieces, such as jewelry. And there's the remains of another shell. There's also some smaller shells. And even in times past, these shells were used as money. There's different places where they found different sized shells in burial tombs and different things, and these things were used as a source of money at some point. So there was many uses for these shells. I'm going to walk on back. I'm walking up on Mound 3 right now. Hope this wind noise isn't too bad. I didn't bring a wireless mic with me today. I'll show you what kind of terrain we got to deal with here. Lots of old dead brush. You can see Mound 4 coming up on us here, and there's another one behind it. This is Mound 4. Mound 5 is coming up here. There's Mound 5. Now notice how this grass is growing here, but there's no grass growing on the mound, which is typical when you find mounds even on farmland. The crops will not grow where there's mounds, or there'll be a stunted growth. That's because the soil is so compacted that the density of it doesn't allow anything to take root. Alright, so this would be Mound 6. And then over there's a mound right through there. You can barely see it. But I'm going to make my way through some of this stuff and show you the density of this place, but also show you, even out in this really thick stuff, you come up on mounds and there's nothing growing where the mound is. So I'm trying to plow my way through some of this thick stuff to show you one of these other mounds. And I think I'm coming up on one now. It's hard to decide which way to go sometimes. What is the path of least resistance? Maybe this way. Okay, I think I see another mound up ahead of us. Big open spot. So, this mound only has a rise of about 2 feet, but you see that all of this thick stuff doesn't grow very much on this mound. So, now you can see the lake in the distance. I walked through all that stuff just to get to this mound, but I wanted you to see up close what it looks like, the sparseness of the vegetation that grows on the mound versus all of the thick stuff around us here. And so this will be better illustrated when I launch the drone in a little bit, and I'll point out some of these places and you'll see how many mounds there are out here. So this was a whole village. This is a prehistoric village. We don't know how old this place was. I haven't found any artifacts here to be able to date it by arrowhead type. Is one way you could use to date things if you didn't have the means of carbon dating. So actually I'm standing on what I would call mound 2. There's another mound just on the water's edge, and I'm going to take off from the middle of mound 2 and I'm going to show you the rest of the mounds in this complex. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stand in the center of this mound and I'm going to fly the drone backwards and go up so you can see these mounds, and I'm going to try to lay out the complex with the drone and show you the mounds that are out in the thick stuff also. So you can see the down tree that's behind me there. I looked on it to see if I could see any artifacts possibly sticking out of that. That's some place you typically find some arrowheads, because that big tree falling over uprooted some ground that hadn't been uncovered in a long time. But I didn't find any artifacts there. I am sitting on a mound right now. I'm sitting on my four-wheeler. You can hear my fan just kicked on. But I'm sitting on the four-wheeler. I'm sitting on a mound, and you can see the lake in the distance. So I looked on the satellite image and on LiDAR image, and it showed that there were some mounds out here in this field, and there's some woods back behind me, and I'm gonna go off into these woods and see if I can find any mounds in the woods. And it's gonna be getting dark soon, so I'll need to head back towards the truck in a little bit. And guess what? There's a mound. There's another one behind it. Let's go look. So evidently there are mounds out in these woods also. The LiDAR image that I saw showed that, and I'm actually sitting on top of the mound right now, still sitting on the four-wheeler, and by the looks of things, this mound complex stretches out about a quarter mile. So this is a pretty extensive complex that would have housed maybe up to around 500 people. It's amazing that we're not finding any artifacts, but being that this is all covered in leaves and the bank of the lake is all covered in silt, it's probably not likely that you would find something very easily. So I'm going to go out and see how far these mounds extend out into the woods. So I just found two more mounds. I'm sitting on one again, and then there's another one right over there. You see it dips down, and then it rises back up. So I'm standing on what I labeled the Great Mound in the drone footage, and this mound towers above the rest of the complex. So if this was a place where there was a group of people living that had a chief, the chief would probably have lived in a dwelling on top of this mound, or at least the ceremonial center would be on top of this mound. So either or. But anyway, this is the biggest mound in the complex, and I just wanted you to see how far above it was the rest of the mounds, which are directly back behind me. Well, this concludes today's adventure. The sun's setting low in the west, and it'll be getting dark soon. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a like, a subscribe, and share with your friends. Remember, be safe, God bless, and we'll see you next time on Brent Outdoors.
I know you told your friend you're not okay, and tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. Guess you're trying to stay strong and fake a smile until I look away. But I've known you too long, it hurts to watch your blue eyes fade to gray as you fade away.